Today's show comes out of the Museum of the Strange and Unexplained. And actually, Monica, you wanted to be on display. Monica Ryan-Smith is here too, so we're going to display her in a minute. That was a good shot. And so what happens here is we have done this interview before or similar to that, and of course it didn't turn out to remind you. Neither did the Tom Stahl show, and so that shows us this is really important. And as you know, I'm very guided to do things, so this is probably one of the most important interviews I've ever done, and it's not an exclusive, unfortunately, but it's just as big and important because it comes from the heart. So today we're going to say hello to Bob White, my new friend, I hope.
Certainly.
Certainly, yeah. We met in
Laughlin, Nevada.
we did, yeah. And you just dropped into my world one day.
Dropped in.
And dropped out, so we are back. You invited us to come here.
You bet.
Yeah. Bob White, the person, can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I started out in show business. I've been an entertainer most of my life. And I wrote songs and did musical comedy and did movies and television. So I'm not looking for 15 minutes of fame.
We have a whole hour here.
But I didn't want this to happen to me. I never asked for this. But it happened to me, and it changed my entire outlook on life. The life here and the life hereafter. It was an experience that I hope not too many people are going to have to go through. It's a very, very difficult thing to try to prove something. So I've stopped trying to prove it.
Yeah, now, a lot of times when we talk about strange or unexplained or whatever, we haven't got to the main subject here yet. People say, "Oh, that's wonderful. I wish I could do this." How would you advise them?
If you see something in the sky that's unusual, don't look.
That's a good point, yeah. Your life will never be the same.
That's true, it won't. This is the most difficult undertaking I've ever had in my life. I'm 72 years old, and I just never have undertaken anything like this before. I thought that because it's such a stupendous thing, that everyone would just beat a path to my door and help me prove or disprove whatever this is.
Whatever it is. Now, we probably won't tell the story in the order that it happened, simply because it just kind of goes back and forth. No, I have to cut it here. Are these cameras running?
Yes.
Okay, cool. We had a little, the front door open. The object we're talking about, and I can show you close up, and here's the actual object on display, and a lot of story connected with it. So I'm just trying to draw your attention. That's why we're sitting right here, so you can see the full size of this. And while we're getting a close up of that, take me back to the day your life changed there in that area.
I'm not exactly sure of the date. It was either 1985 or 1986. And the reason that I'm not sure of it, because it wasn't important to me at the time. My entire life was show business. I didn't believe in anything like this. I didn't even want to hear about it. Didn't listen to any stories about things like this, but I was in Denver, Colorado. And my brother and I was known then as the James Brothers. And we were supposed to open a new club in Denver. Well, it wasn't open. They had about 3 or 4 more days to go before they finished opening it, to open it. And we hadn't had a vacation in 3 or 4 years. And I decided this is a good time for a little R&R. So I wanted to go to Las Vegas since we were that close. Well, my brother didn't want to go, and we only had 1 car. So I said, well, that's all right, I'll leave the car with you and I'll take the bus. Well, there was a young lady that we had just met in the hotel there that lived in Las Vegas, and she said, I'm going back to Vegas tonight. If you would like to ride along with me, you're welcome. I'd have to bring the bus back to Denver. I said, fine. So we're outside of Grand Junction, Colorado, between Grand Junction, Colorado, and Cisco, Utah. And I was asleep, and she was driving, and it was her car. So she woke me and asked me what this strange light was up ahead. Well, I looked, and there was a railroad track on the right-hand side. This was old Highway 6. This was before the superhighway went in. There was no traffic on the highway.
I've been on that highway.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
But it was really deserted. But if you've ever been in the high desert,
Yeah.
you know, on a clear night when the stars are shining and everything, you could see forever without headlights. Well, we hadn't passed any traffic, but anyway, I looked ahead, and since there was a railroad track on the right-hand side, I said, this is a railroad light, and I went back to sleep. Well, it must have been doing some pretty strange things, because she woke me up again a few minutes later, and she was terrified, and just shaking like a leaf. And she said, that's not a railroad light. Well, I looked again, and she was right. This time, this thing was the size of a full harvest moon.
Yeah.
And I said, you're right, it isn't. So I decided to stay awake and watch it. Well, we drove this way for a while, and the closer we got to it, the bigger it got. So I just reached over to shut the headlights off. And we drove down, because there wasn't any traffic, and I felt it was safe to do so. And we drove this way for a while, and we rounded a curve in the highway. Now the light is on the left-hand side of the road instead of the right side. And I said, well, I just reached over to shut the ignition off, and I said, let's coast up as close as we can get to it. Well, we coasted up to within, about 200 yards, and I had her stop the car. And I thought, I'll get out, and now this thing is huge. I mean, it's the size of, say, a 3-story building, or a huge barn. And I thought, my first impression was, this is the high desert. I know they do night mining up here. These are those big halogen lights. I'll get out of the car, I'll take a look, and I'll see all this heavy equipment. I'll get back in the car, and I'll calm her down.
Calm her down, yeah.
And we'll be on our way.
Yeah.
Well, I got out of the car, and out of the passenger side, and I stepped in front of the car, and I'm looking at this light like this because it's so bright. I had to shield my eyes from it, but I couldn't see if there was anything solid in it or not, and I couldn't see around it. It was just too big and too bright. Well, for some unknown reason, she turned the headlights on. And when she did, this object on the ground just shot up in the sky like that as fast as my eyes could follow.
I know it wasn't a train, right?
Right. And it connected to two other, looked like two blue neon tubular lights, one on top of the other with a space in between. And then it just shot across the sky out of sight. It was gone. But before it did, it left me a present.
Yeah.
This object, whatever it was ejected out of it right back toward me, and it was on fire. It was glowing. Now I say, and it was ejected, because had it fallen straight down, it would have been broken off and fallen. It would have been miles from me. I'd have never found it. But it came right back at me. Now I'm scared, because I thought this is the same thing coming back.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I want to interrupt you for a minute. For anyone that's ever been in a situation like that, and there are some of you, because I've talked to you, it can be pretty discerning to say the least.
Well, it wasn't until it came back.
Yeah.
And then when it came back at me, it hit on the other side of a little embankment. And I said, I gotta find out what this is. So I climbed up the embankment, and I stepped over a little barbed wire fence. And I saw the groove in the hillside like this, and it straightened out. And I followed the groove in the ground, and there it lay. And it was still glowing, so it was still hot.
Meaning
this, the object.
meaning the object.
So I thought, well, I gotta get this. Well, it was still glowing, and I knew it was hot. I didn't want to pick it up.
Yeah, see, that part of the story I don't remember. We didn't talk about that the last time.
No, but
it was hot.
But it was. It was still glowing. It was still glowing hot. So I walked back to the car, and I took the keys out of the ignition to open the trunk. Well, for 2 reasons. One, by this time she's out of the car, she's hysterical. She's crying and she's yelling at me, let's get out of here. And I said, we will just as soon as I check something out. So I took the keys out of the ignition. 2 reasons. One, I didn't want her to run off and leave me up there in the middle of nowhere.
Good thinking.
Because she would have.
Yeah.
And so I went to the trunk and I opened the trunk because it's her car and I didn't know what was in the trunk.
You didn't even know her very well.
No, I just met her.
You met her.
But I didn't know what was in
Poor
the
lady.
trunk, other than my suitcase. I had
Yeah.
one little suitcase in there with a change of clothes in it. Opened up her trunk and I looked in and I found one of these old brown cotton work gloves. And I went back to the object. By this time, I got her calmed down. I said, get in the car. As soon as I check this out, I said, I'll drive. And so I went back, and I still got the keys. So I went back to the object. By this time, it was no longer glowing, so I run the back of my hand across it. I didn't feel any heat. But I took the glove, and I just dropped it on there.
So in other words, it cooled down rather
Immediately.
quickly. Gee, that's interesting.
And I noticed this has the ability to retain cold.
Cold. Now, I'm gonna say something here. When we talked about the thermal tiles with David Adair, they were cherry red, and we could touch it, and it was cold.
This is the way this is.
It's the same way?
Yes, and
yeah,
it will
and
retain
we showed you that.
It'll retain cold for a long time.
Wow.
Now, when I got this object, I dropped the glove on top of it in case it was still hot. I could let go of it and wouldn't catch the glove on fire on my hand. But at least I was still able to think a little bit logically. So I picked it up and I took it back to the car. Now this whole thing took about 25 minutes. By the time I got back there, she was laying down in the front seat. And I opened up the trunk and I put the object in the trunk because if she'd have known that I had it, she wouldn't have let me back in the car.
Well, I wouldn't let you back in the car either.
She wouldn't have
because
done
it could have been radioactive, it
Right.
could have been anything.
Well, I never even thought about that. I didn't know anything about radioactive.
Say that again, please. I didn't.
I didn't know anything about radioactivity.
Right. Now, this is a good point here because when we had our encounter with consequences, the one that we talked to Peter Davenport about, one of the questions we were asked, well, what did you do afterwards? Well, when you do something like that, you don't think.
No,
Just no thought.
I didn't know about radioactivity. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a 7th grade education. What do I know about radioactivity? I do now
Yeah.
because I have 2 scientists here. But anyway, I put the object in the trunk of the car and we drove on down the road till we got to Cisco, Utah, and she was shaking like a leaf, still shaking, still scared. And I got to admit, I was unnerved too. But I had to drive. She couldn't even drive. And we got to Cisco. I wanted to get us a drink. But there was nothing open except this little all-night diner. And the thing was really small. I say there was about 4 stools at the counter, and there was 2 old tables in the place, like dinette sets, those old chrome dinette
ones,
sets
yeah.
with 2 chairs at each one. And we sit down at the counter and got a cup of coffee, the strongest thing they had, and it was strong. And we sit down at the counter, and she, I was discussing what we had seen, and there were 2 old guys sitting behind us at one of the tables. And I say old because I wasn't old then. But they were sitting back, and I guess they were prospectors or miners or something like that, and they overheard us. And one of them come up and he said, you folks saw something out there tonight, didn't you? And I said, yeah. I said, we saw some lights. And he said, did you report it? And I said, no, I didn't report it. I didn't know who to report it to, and why would I want to?
There's a lot of uranium mines in that in that area too. For the friends that don't know too much about Grand Junction.
Oh, now see, I didn't know that until you just now said it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
But he gave me the guy said, well, he said, we see these here all the time, every night. And he said, we report it. He said, they won't even investigate.
Yeah, Grand Junction, they sit in the middle of the city and nobody does anything, broad daylight. Yeah.
He said, if you folks would report it, maybe coming from a couple of outsiders, they might investigate. And I said, well, I don't know who to report it to anyway.
Yeah.
But he gave me a phone number. And he said, call this number. And so I said, okay, just to please the guy and to get him away from us. And I didn't want to discuss it with anyone. I felt foolish. So anyway, when we left the diner, there was a phone booth outside, and I said, remember this, an old green phone booth. And they were looking, so I went in and called it. It was a local call. Now I understand now from Dr. Jordan that this was near Greenfield or Green something.
No,
Green River.
Green River. That's
Green River.
That's where Highway 6 comes onto I-70. It's a little town right in the
Well,
corner there.
this is a local call, and whoever I talked to, they answered the phone, it sounded as though they had some authority, and I told them what we saw. I didn't tell them about the object, I just told them what we saw, And he said, well, what you saw was probably some headlights from an automobile or some swamp gases or so. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. He blew me off. So I just hung up and left. Well, since that time, this has become quite a challenge.
A challenge, yeah. And then we talked earlier, you said then eventually showed it to your brother and he didn't, want nothing to do with it.
Well, when I came back to Denver, I came back on the Greyhound bus, and when I got back to the hotel, I saw my brother in the coffee shop, and I said, when you get through with your coffee, come upstairs, I got something I want to tell you. He said, okay, so when he finished, he came up, and I told him what happened. And he said, sure, he laughed, you know, like most people do. And he asked me, the first thing he asked me, and I've heard this a lot of times, he said, what was you smoking?
Yeah.
He knew I didn't do drugs. Yeah. But I drank, and he said, how much did you have to drink? And I said, nothing, I was asleep.
Yeah.
And I said, she woke me up, I was asleep. And he said, yeah, sure, good story. And so I opened my suitcase and I took the object out and showed it to him and I handed it to him, and then he believed me. And he said, get that thing out of here, I don't even want it in the same room with me. Because he said, it might be radioactive. Now, he knew about radioactivity, I didn't. But I gave the object to my sister. And the reason I gave it to her is because my sister is very stable. And it was in one place.
In one place, yeah.
And I knew she wouldn't get rid of it. I didn't tell her the story. I just said, would you keep this for me? Yeah. And she asked me what it was, and I said, I think it's a piece of experimental metal. Yeah. Now, my thought still at that time was, this is a secret project that our government is working on. I still couldn't accept UFOs. But I knew I had never seen anything like this before in my life.
Well, what you said earlier is that you told me you had hired a third person, and then one night he wanted you to drop him off. So if you could relate that fits in really well here.
Well, my agenda at the time was show business. I was doing movies, I was doing television, I had records out of songs that I've written. And my career was going real good, and I did not want to be called some UFO nut.
Nut, yeah.
And so I didn't report it. I didn't say anything about it.
Well,
and I hired this other gentleman, this young man, his name was Billy West. And I hired him to work with my brother and I to take some of the pressure off of us because he was very talented. Well, he had only been with us a few months. And one morning he knocked on my door at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd just finished a show. And he said, take me to the bus station. I said, what for? He said, I'm going home. And I said, why? What's wrong? What did we do? He said, nothing. But I said, why do you want to leave? He said, I can't handle this. He said, you guys don't have a life. He said, all you do is eat, sleep, drink, and think show business.
Show business, yeah.
And he said, I have to do other things. Yeah. And I said, you mean there's other things?
Yeah. And so,
I couldn't believe that anybody could be in the business and not devote their entire life to it.
Yeah. Because
that's the way we were, very dedicated.
Yeah, and so now you have other things.
Oh boy, do I ever. This has really been a challenge.
Yeah.
I came back home, back in Missouri, and then after I retired, my sister still had the object. My sister at the time lived in Independence, Missouri. Well, my brother-in-law passed away, and then just about a year later, my sister passed away. By this time now, I'm retired, and I had to claim some of her belongings, and there were a couple of suitcases there, and my wife was unpacking the suitcases in our place, asking me what to do with some of her clothes and stuff, and give them away. And then she came out with this terry cloth towel. And the object was wrapped in the towel. Yeah. And she showed it to me. She said, what is this? And why does your sister have it? Well, then I had to tell her the story. Yeah. I had kept this to myself all this time. Yeah. I had to tell her the story. And she said, this don't belong to you. Yeah. This belongs to the world. You've got to bring this out. You've got to tell people what you have. And I said, you realize what an undertaking this is going to be? Nobody's going to believe this. And she said, what you're going to have to do is pass a polygraph test. Yeah. And I said, well, I'll do that.
Yeah. And we have a copy of that?
Well, before I did that, I mean, I wanted to find out what this was, so I talked to Unsolved Mysteries. I told them the story and I sent them photographs of it. And they said, well, we would like to do a story on this. Would you mind having it analyzed by Los Alamos? And I said, not at all.
Yeah.
And
Now, for the people that don't know what Los Alamos it does exactly, would you?
Los Alamos
explain
is a
that?
government laboratory.
Right.
At the time, I didn't know it was a government laboratory. I sure
Yeah,
really
a
didn't.
lot of people.
I didn't know, but I thought it. And I asked him at Los Alamos, I said, well, I said, I don't want to bring this out to the government because I'm afraid they'll take it away from me.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's not government.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute. I thought Los Alamos was government funded. I said, no, this particular department is not funded by the government. And not only that, but the producer, brother, the producer of the Unsolved Mystery Show, her brother is the head man in the metallurgy department at Los Alamos, and he's the one that'll be doing the analysis. And I said, well, that sounds pretty good. I said, why don't you call him and he will assure you that it's not government founded. So his name is Paul Dunn. So I called him, and he assured me that it wasn't. He said he was funded by the University of California, which is funded by the government, which
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And he asked me for my social security number, which should have been the tip-off, but it wasn't. Being naive and trusting people. And so I gave my social security number. I said, what's this for? He said, so I can get you a clearance to get on the property. And I said, oh, okay. So anyway,
Under non-government property.
no, the whole facility was government, but that particular department was supposed to be non-government, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I was making a joke here.
That was the first lie. That was the first lie that they told me. So I went out, Los Alamos paid my expenses, and they paid for the analysis. Now this is the second analysis. I should back up a little bit here. The first analysis came through the National Institute for Discovery Science. They asked me to send them a piece of it. And I said, okay, I'll just cut a piece off the small end. It's only about as big around my finger. And it's just aluminum. I'll just take a hacksaw and cut right to it. Sure.
Yeah.
2.5 hours later, I cut through it. I broke a hacksaw blade and I wore the teeth off of 2 others.
Wow.
That's how hard this is. Well, to make a long story short, through all the analysis that I've had on it, there's been 5 so far, none of them agree on the conclusions. However, we have found that there's a small percentage of elements that are missing. Either they can't be identified, or they do have identified them
And
and
they
won't
won't tell
say.
you. Yeah.
Now, what we do know is that this is 80% aluminum. And so far, there's been over 30 different rare earth elements that have been identified. Things like strontium, gadolinium, vanadium, other things I can't even
Well, you
pronounce.
learned a lot, huh?
Yeah, but it's the gadolinium in it that has the ability to retain cold.
Yeah.
I found that out by looking up the atomic chart off of the Los Alamos website on the internet. There's some very, very strange elements in here, which gives this object the consistency of aluminum,
Yeah.
but the grain structure of steel.
Yeah. Now, in the interview with Dr. Jordan, you will see at one point in Lansing. No, not Lansing. In Laughlin. I actually held it, and it is light. And you would almost think if you squashed it hard enough, it would just,
Yeah.
just kind of foam.
But
It just kind of, but it's not.
Well, when I opened the museum, I had Larry Sikander had some money to help with this. But before he would put his money in it, he says to me, I want you to pass a lie detector test.
Yeah.
I said, fine.
Now we get to that.
Fine with me. I said, but who do I go to? I said, I don't want anyone that is into ufology. And he said, I know a police officer, 28 years with the police department giving polygraph tests. I'll see if he'll do it. And he agreed. So we went to see him. He said, the first thing I want you to, his name is George Lardy. He's still with the sheriff's department. He's the head of the drug unit in Springfield. He said, I want you to go do a sworn affidavit. Bring the affidavit back to me and let me study it for a couple of days, and then I'll call you in for the polygraph.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. Well, I took the affidavit to him, and he laughed when he read it. There's no such thing as a UFO, and he laughed.
And we have a copy of the statement.
Okay, so he said, I'll study this. So I left. About 2 weeks later, he called me in for the test. Not 2 days, 2 weeks. So I went in, I took one test. That's all I had to take.
That's
And
fine.
I will take a dozen more. It don't
Yeah.
matter to me, because I've got the truth on my side.
Yeah.
So anyway,
If you hear background noises, there are people in the museum now. And by the way, the music that you're hearing is Bob White with the James Brothers, and we wanted to. He was nice enough to allow us to do that too. So back to you, back to your line,
well, you know, when I did the sworn affidavit, I got to back up again here, because when I left the piece of this with Los Alamos, they were supposed to call me. I said, how long is it going to, Dr. Reiswick is the one that did the analysis, and I said, how long is it going to be before I get some information on this? Oh, he said, only a couple of days. So I came back home to Missouri, and I waited, and I waited almost a month. And I didn't hear from him, so he had given me his home phone number, so I called him. I couldn't reach him at Los Alamos. He was unavailable. So I called him at home.
It's amazing you didn't take it away from you.
I wouldn't let him have it. I wouldn't let it out of my sight. I gave him a piece of it.
That's right.
They cut a piece of it off. So they wanted me to send it, and I said, no way.
Yeah.
But anyway,
A month later.
Dr. Reiswick, I called him at home, and he was excited. And he said, this is, now he's an older gentleman that was retired from Los Alamos, and they only called him in on special projects, he told me. And he said mine was a special project. So when I called him at home, he was really excited. He said, Bob, this is something I've been looking for all my life. This is definitely extraterrestrial. I said, would you mind repeating that? Because I said, I only have one phone here, and I want you to tell my wife that, because she won't believe me coming from me. And he repeated it to her. Now, I put that in my sworn affidavit. So I told Mike O'Brien, newspaper columnist for the News Leader in Springfield, what he said, what Dr. Reiswick said. And so Mike O'Brien called him. And he told Mike O'Brien, I didn't say that was extraterrestrial, and my bosses have instructed me not to speak about this to anyone, and hung up on him.
Now I want to remind you again that the word terrestrial means earthly, and extraterrestrial means not of earth origin.
Right.
So,
So after I did the sworn affidavit and I put that in there, and I found out that Los Alamos was not telling me the truth, I started taping all my telephone conversations.
yeah.
Oh, do I have them in some good ones.
We learn fast,
Yes.
don't we?
Yes, we do. I thought everybody would be honest with me.
No.
Boy, was I naive.
Yeah, so.
So anyway, I took the polygraph examination, and George Larvey was not a believer, but he is now.
He is now. And so it's time to change the tape. So what we're going to do, actually we're going to go take a cigarette break, and then we'll go and go to the next part of it, some of the challenges that you had since then. And yeah, and we are going to show
Oh,
that.
I'll show you some real good information here.
We have like 2 minutes. This tape, we talked a half an hour already. Did
Did
you
we?
know that?
Boy, it went
yeah,
fast,
it goes
didn't it?
fast. So it's well, for us it's a cigarette break. You can get a drink if you like, because now it's really going to get hairy. And we'll see you in a few minutes. We had our little break here. And so now, anyway, we had taken me all the way up to the point where, to refresh your memory, where of how this object was found, how some of the challenges in trying to prove what it was. And so now we're going to go into the it's not really a trauma, but the traumatic turn that your life took, now that you have this thing. And what I want to put in here first was after I met Bob White, someone said, well, the thing is here, everything is free, except we saw something on the internet somewhere. And so if we can mention that first and then go into,
I mean, where I offered the object for sale?
yeah, and why you did that.
Okay.
It was brilliant.
There's two reasons why I did it. Number one.
And we don't know what you did, so you tell us.
Okay. What I did was I ran a little ad in the classified section of a little local newspaper here. Circulation is probably 100,000. It cost me $37, and I put it in classified that I had a piece of a UFO for sale for $10 million. Now,
Yeah.
there's two reasons I did that. Number one, I didn't ever think I would get a buyer for it. And if I did, there would have to be qualifications. And the qualifications would be, if you buy this, it will not be put away, hidden somewhere for just you and your friends to look at. You will finish the analysis, because I had run out of money. And it costs money to do these analysis, and I don't have it. So I did it for that reason, and for another reason I did it to gain publicity so that the whole world could know about this thing. And I didn't dream, I thought I would get local publicity. I didn't dream that it would snowball the way it did. What happened was the Associated Press showed up, Fox News showed up, and it went all over the world. Now people are aware that I have this thing, that it does exist, and I am credible.
Okay, so having said all of that, and but it still didn't solve anything for you.
Didn't solve a thing.
Right, so now let's go backwards again and pick up where we left off.
The analysis that I've had done on this, very strange things. When I found out that these people were not telling me the truth, as I said, I started taping my telephone conversations. Now, this is a very interesting scenario. After I was told by the scientist in Los Alamos that this was extraterrestrial, and then he denied that he said it, I started taping my telephone conversations. Well, I got a email message from a doctor who doesn't want to be identified, from La Jolla, California, at the university there, and he said in his analysis, or in his first email to me, he said, "I am the analytical manager of the Isotope Abundance Ratio Lab in La Jolla, California. I read about you on the internet on your website, hardevidence.com. He said that I would like to have a piece of this object to analyze for you at no cost." Well, that intrigued me. And he asked me, he said, has any isotope tests been done? And I said, yes. They did isotope ratio tests at Los Alamos. He said, what element did they do it on, do you know? And I said, yes, they did it on silicon. That's what it says in the report that they sent me. He said, silicon, that's ridiculous. He said, and I'll tell you why. He said, when we do analysis isotopes, he said, we destroy silicon. It's destroyed. And he said, that's the only thing that you can't get an isotope test on, because if you measure it, you'll always get the same measurement as you would if you measured a piece of granite, a chip that runs your computer, or a grain of sand on the beach. It will always come out the same. And I said, well, that's unusual. He said, well, would you send me a small piece of it? And I said, well, I'm not going to cut it again.
Yeah, because pretty soon all you know.
Yeah. And he said, well, I just need a small piece. And I said, well, how large a piece do you need? I said, they sent me some pieces back from Los Alamos. Well, Los Alamos took a hunk off of it this big around and about this thick. And they only sent me back half of it. And he said, well, all anyone needs is a piece as big as your thumbnail. Well, my question was, why did Los Alamos take such a big hunk and not return it to me?
Yeah, I'm surprised you got it back at all.
Oh, well, I didn't leave my hands. I never left my sight except when they cut it.
Yeah, that's what it says.
But I was right there when they cut it. And he said, the manager of the Isotope Lab in La Jolla, California, told me, he said, if you'll send me a piece of it, I'll analyze it. And I said, fine. Well, I called Los Alamos, and I talked to Dr. Reiswick again that did the analysis on this. And I said, Dr. Reiswick, what did you do isotope tests on? I said, the report says you did it on silicon. Now he knows I know a
You
little
know
bit.
something, yeah.
He said, no, I think we did it on aluminum. Now, I have this on tape.
Yeah.
He said, I believe we did it on aluminum.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the report says silicon. He said, well, I don't know, you'll have to talk to Paul Dunn.
Yeah.
So I called Paul Dunn. And I said, Paul, what did you do isotope tests on? I said, the report says you did it on silicon. Dr. Reiswick thinks you did it on aluminum.
Aluminum.
What did you do it on? He said, we didn't do any isotope tests at all, just straight elemental,
Yeah.
GED. Well, the report on the wall says they did isotope tests on silicon. Now, Unsolved Mysteries paid for that.
Yeah.
Did they
that's
do it
right.
or didn't they do it?
Yeah.
And if they did it, why don't they give us the true results?
Yeah. In your journey here, one of the things you told me about, even though, I mean, it has, other than what's still hanging on your wall that needs to be done, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it is, unfortunately, you know, we have to triple back everything here. In your opinion, why aren't there any takers? I don't mean the money part.
Yeah.
Why aren't, in your opinion, why aren't there any people that?
I thought-
It's the biggest thing that has happened.
You know, this is my thought.
Yeah.
The first UFO convention I went to was in Eureka Springs,
Yeah.
Arkansas, which is only about 30 miles from here. And I thought, I'll take this down there when I heard about the convention. And everybody down there will say, hey, let me help you.
Yeah,
Not one.
did not happen.
Every one of them wanted to capitalize on it. I gave pieces to Linda Moulton Howe, which she says she later lost or they just disappeared.
Yeah,
I gave pieces to a MUFON representative. They disappeared.
yeah,
The isotope manager, analytical manager in La Jolla, California, came this close to getting extraterrestrial signature. And all of a sudden told me, he sent me a chart showing me how close they were, told me, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to finish it. There's more tests that I want to do, but I am so busy working for the European Space Agency and NASA that I don't have time to do it. And I said, well, if I can just publish your findings so
Yeah.
far.
yeah,
Oh no, he said, you can't use my name or the name of the facility that I work for.
that's weird, huh?
And I said, well, then what you've done doesn't do me a bit of good. I said, maybe it's because, after we finished talking on the phone, I said, well, maybe it's because he's doing this free and he didn't get money, so I called him back and offered to pay.
Yeah.
I said, I'll pay whatever expenses are, but I gotta use your name
Yeah, to get
and
the
your
big
facilities.
things, yeah.
And he said, oh no, we won't accept any money. He said, you just can't use my name.
Yeah.
Why? Why won't scientists stand behind what they find?
Well, it sounds very much they are, not only you, they are somewhat stonewalled here.
Yeah, well, then I found out that the facilities that this Dr. X works for is also funded by Southern California University, which is government.
Did that surprise you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it surprised me. I'm naive.
Yeah.
Not so much now as I used to be.
I was going to say, early in the game we find that kind of strange, but because everything's so connected, you go from one to the next and you find, oh well, what do you expect? And it's almost discouraging, but
Well, I don't want to say that I haven't had help. I've had a lot of help from a lot of good people. I've had help from Peter Davenport.
yeah. Peter Davenport,
I've had help.
your hotline.
I've had help from John Greenwald
Yeah.
at the Black Ball.
He's the young man that we mentioned to you that if he was very, very young. Blackball.
He is young.
Well, he was younger.
He's 21 now.
I know, but the first time I mentioned him, he was a lot
About
younger.
17 when he got
Yeah.
started.
So you can go to my webpage and go to the Blackball anytime you feel like it.
Sure. Well, here's an interesting thing. After we got into this thing, after I got into it and started doing some investigating and having these people help me, that doing some investigating, like Dr. Gibbons and Dr. Jordan, we found out from John Greenwald
Yeah.
and from Clifford Stone in Roswell, that he showed us a picture, a Xerox copy of a picture, of an object that looked exactly like mine. And I thought right away, uh-oh,
Somebody got your
somebody
pictures,
took the
yeah.
picture off my website and they want me to say, this was supposed to come from the government.
Yeah.
This was released through the Freedom of Information Act of an object that was recovered in Denmark in the 1940s before Roswell that looked like the one I have. And I said, they're trying to trick me. They want me to put this up on my website saying, here's something from the Army.
Else, yeah.
But after we got back home from Laramie, where we did a lecture there, my webmaster looked it up on the Army website, which you'll see on the document on the wall. The file number is 202085. I've memorized that. And it is a Xerox copy of a photograph of an object that looks similar to mine.
Similar.
It doesn't have the flow lines, but it's the same shape, and it has the chads, as Dr. Jordan calls them. But anyway, it's quite a bit like the one I have, and this was in the 1940s.
In the 40s, yeah. Now, I don't know all the details here, but I do remember in the interview I did with Dr. Jordan, either that or he told it to me another time, he said it also reminded him of some of the things that the Foo Fighters, where did the Foo Fighters come in?
I asked that same question.
Yeah.
You see, back in the 40s, before Roswell, and before the other guy coined the phrase, what was his name that coined
The
the
flying
phrase?
saucer.
Of the flying saucer?
Yeah.
They didn't know what these things were.
Right.
They didn't know what they were, so they called them a Foo Fighter.
Foo Fighter.
And you know where they got that?
From the Japanese planes?
No, you know where they? There was a cartoon character, Smokey Stover,
Oh.
wore the fireman's hat back in the 30s, a cartoon in the newspapers, and his name was Smokey Stover, and he called he said, where there's foo, there's fire. And they didn't know what to call these things, and some guy said, well, let's call them Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters, okay, well, I'm glad we clarified that.
That's where they got the phrase Foo Fighter before flying saucers.
I see.
So Dr. Jordan was saying it was from a Foo Fighter, this object was.
Yeah,
Now,
I've heard that word so often I didn't know how it comes
there's
in.
a very famous video, which we found out later, that was done in Salida, Colorado, which is right near Grand Junction, about 200 miles.
On the other side of Monarch. Yep.
Well, this guy's name is Tim Edwards, and he and his 6-year-old daughter was out in the yard having a barbecue, and his 6-year-old daughter kept trying to get his attention because there was something in the sky. Finally got his attention, and he saw it, and he ran in the house, got his camcorder, and came back, and there was only 5 minutes of tape left on the battery, on the camcorder. But he taped it. That has been proven to be authentic. There's no fake about this.
Yeah.
And when it's been all over. It's been on hard copy. It's been on extra. It's been on real people. It's been everywhere, and they cannot prove that it's a fake.
Yeah.
They know it's authentic. So what he photographed was real. Now this is near where I had my sighting.
Yeah.
Now the same day that Tim Edwards saw this, 200 miles from there, Grand Junction, Colorado, the same day, Robert St. John, a disc jockey, and his friend,
I know that story.
they were out jogging and they saw the same object that Tim Edwards had photographed, only they saw it shoot 2 objects into the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
Now, we took the picture of Tim Edwards and got a still from it and blew the object up, and as you'll see on the wall, they blew the object up, and it's in the daytime now, but if you'll look at it, you'll see 2 oblong objects with a space in the middle.
Yeah.
And what I saw was the same thing, only it was at night and it looked blue.
It looked blue, yeah.
So there's some more proof
Yeah.
in that same area.
Oh, well, I would, you know, you're so familiar with my book, and Grand Junction is a big part of that. Some of my experiences.
Yes.
And so, okay, so now we're here. I'm going to inject it in the middle. What is it you need? What did we leave out, and what is it you need from people in order for you to do what some kind of way you have to do here?
I have something here that I know in my heart. This is something I can't explain. It's something I know. I know that what I saw, what I recovered, is not of this earth. I know this. But I want proof. And proof costs money. I thought all the people in ufology that wanted to know the proof, that wanted to know whether they exist or they don't exist, would just drop down out of the sky and say, let me help.
Oh.
Here's $1.
No.
Well, if you get 1 million people to
Yeah.
send you $1, you've got $1 million. You realize what kind of analysis that you could do with that kind of money? I'm retired now. I don't have the income that I had when I was, you know, I was making $1,000 a day when I was playing music. I don't have that kind of income anymore. I get $572 a month, Social Security. Because being an entertainer, I didn't pay as much as I should have paid, probably. And I didn't know when I was younger that it was going to affect me. In fact, I didn't think I'd live this long.
Yeah. So if anybody's out there that has resources or friends or network, get on the web, because I found this to be really, really interesting. And actually, this trip is not my idea. Universe kind of had to throw me back here to do the whole story here, so it has a different impact on you. And so I'm kind of excited that in some roundabout way I can be part of this.
Well, you'd be a big help.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the museum is a 501c3,
Yeah.
and if anybody does donate any money, it's tax deductible.
But that makes no difference.
I know.
People are just funny that way.
But you know, a person, let's say this didn't happen to me,
Yeah.
and I knew about it. It happened to someone else, and I knew about it. I'd say, oh, that's bull. But I'll send the guy a couple of bucks just to prove that it isn't.
Yeah.
You know, I contacted Skeptic Magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm desperate. I really want to know what this is, and I would assume everybody else wants to know. So I contacted Skeptic Magazine, who debunks everything.
Yeah.
And I said, look guys, here's what I got, and it's a piece of a UFO. I'll send you a piece of it, and you analyze it and prove I don't have it.
Yeah.
And they sent me back an email, said, does this mean you're going to turn the object over to us? And I said, of course not. I think you knew the answer to that before you asked, but I'll be happy to send you a piece of it. All you need is a small piece to analyze it. And they sent me back, and I said, you can come into the museum and look at it and hold it and touch it anytime you want. You know what they sent me back? They said, we're a small organization. We don't have the funding for that.
Yeah.
Baloney.
Now, I don't know if I'm going to have copies of it, but at this point it's sort of irrelevant. Not irrelevant. I don't feel it's necessary to get all the news reports we did out of the Laughlin area. But I do want to talk about the couple of nights our friend here spent in the safe at the Harris in Laughlin, Nevada.
When they had the UFO conference in February in Laughlin, we weren't invited, but we decided to go and hold a press conference in conjunction. And I contacted the person who has, I won't mention his name, but you know who I'm talking about, who has the convention, and I said, is there any way that we can have the convention, the press conference at your convention, to help you? Not to hinder him, but to help. And I never got an answer. So I went out there, and Larry Sikander, the vice president here, has connections with Harris. And Harris comped us for a suite.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was wonderful too.
Wonderful.
They comped us for a suite. So we stayed in the suite. We're going to have the press conference the next day in the conference room.
Yeah.
And the press was in the hotel room,
Yeah.
our suite.
Yeah.
Now there's a safe, a digital safe in the room. And I tried you got to put a combination in there. I made up a combination, put in there 4 numbers. And I tried the safe 3 or 4 times and it worked fine. So I placed the object in the safe in a case, in the safe. The next morning, I went to open the safe to get it out so we could show it at the press conference, and the safe wouldn't open. Now I'm panicked. Why won't this safe open? I know I put the right combination in. Well, I called the housekeeping, and they said, well, you probably put the wrong combination in. I said, well, I don't think so. Well, we'll send someone up. So they sent someone up from housekeeping. They couldn't open it. So then they called engineering and security. And they came. Now the press is in the room when this is happening.
When it's happening,
Because
yeah.
they wanted to know what was going on, why I didn't come down with the object. So they came into the room and they photographed this at the time, and the video cameras were going. They put the digital thing into the safe, and then he put the combination in, and he said, well, it shows it open, but it wouldn't open. So they drilled it open. They had to drill a hole in the safe, drill it open. They took the battery out, and the end of it was split open, it was leaking out. And I asked the guy, I said, does this happen often? He said, this never happens. I mean, he was upset that I would ask that. He said, it never happens.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know why this happened.
Frequency.
So now we're also having trouble with our door keys, you know, the slide thing in the door. The doors wouldn't open.
Yeah, that's because you were not of this earth in energy fields.
I have no idea what happened, but we had to keep going down to the desk and getting different keys.
Yeah.
It showed, when you put that in, the yellow light lit up, it showed the batteries were dead in the door. Well, the next 2 days,
Yeah.
I put the object back in the safe, and the next 2 days, it jammed the safe again. So 3 days now, it wouldn't open.
Yeah, so you got a little media attention for that one.
Oh, a lot of it, yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, then we said that the 2 scientists that were there with me, Dr. Gibbons,
Yeah.
a nuclear physicist for NASA, was there. He's our executive director now. And Dr. Jordan were there, and both of them thought, this thing must be emitting some sort of electromagnetic current.
That's right.
So when we got back to Missouri, they said there's some tests they want to perform on it. Well, Dr. Gibbons has a friend in Springfield who is a dentist, Dr. Dewar. And Dr. Dewar volunteered some dental x-rays.
Right.
And he said, if you'll place this object on and around,
Yeah,
the x-rays around.
We have some footage of that, and in an upcoming show, we're going to show you how they did that.
And he said, just place it on the x-rays and then put it around the x-rays and take them off at different intervals. He said, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
They'll just be blank. Well, we did that. And we took them off, and we got 4 exposures.
4 exposures, yeah. And right about that time, then somewhere along the line, you found out that it was also just a little radioactive.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what's causing the exposures.
Yeah.
But not enough radiation to hurt a person.
Yeah.
But there's other tests now that have to be done on this thing,
Yeah.
which will definitely give us the proof. And there's no doubt in my mind what it is. There's no doubt that we're going to eventually get the proof.
Yeah.
I hope I live long enough to find it.
You're going to live a long time.
I don't know.
Because I think you're going to have a lot of opposition because, I mean, a lot of people's money is going to stop if, in fact, that's what it is.
Well, you're right.
So you're
You're
going
right.
to, I would think you're going to live a
Well,
long
I'm going to
time.
have a lot of opposition because,
Yeah.
you see, you stop to think about this. There is not a doctor in front of my name or a PhD after my name. So I'm not invited on these conventions. I'm not invited. Now, all of these people that you hear
Yeah.
at these conventions are doctors, scientists, have PhDs, all that. But most of their stories, most of them, have never had an encounter. It's
Yeah.
a second-hand information.
Account, yeah.
Here they have an opportunity to
Yeah.
get first-hand information and they don't want it.
Now, on this particular show, the person with Highstrangeness show here, I make it a point not to give people's titles unless they're so full of themselves they absolutely have to.
Right.
And the reason for that is because people, the majority of people relate to people
Right.
better than that. And so then if there's a question of credibility, they can call the person and say, well, hey, what are your credentials? But I find it most delightful to talk to people as people and tell their story.
I'm
you know?
common as dirt.
Yeah. Good guest.
But-
Yeah, very good guest.
You know, my father, what I remember of him, because he died when I was quite young, 11. And my father had a saying, you can lock your door from a thief,
Yeah,
but you can't from a liar.
yeah.
I grew up in an atmosphere that my dad or my brothers or anyone could call the bank and say, I need a loan to buy a house. There's a house down the road here I want. The banker would, or a car, and the banker would say, well, go write a check,
Mm-hmm.
buy it. We'll put the money in your account.
Yeah,
And then you can come in the next week or 10 days, or
pay
whenever
me.
you have the time,
Yeah.
and sign the loan papers. Not pay me, sign the loan
Signed loan
papers. But you break your word one time, and nobody ever trusted you again.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know, my dad said all a man has,
Is his name in his credit?
he's got one thing that he can give away
Yeah,
and still keep. And that's his word.
yeah. We have to wind up. On that, I thank you. We're gonna show you the rest of the museum for this week on the closing, and there will be a lot more interviews with Bob White. You come see us again, and we hope we made you think. And while you're thinking, maybe you would find it in your heart to give Bob a hand here. And see you next week.
Buy my
Bye.
book.
Thank you. Buy your book. You can do that. Yeah.
Buy my book.
Thanks. Yeah. Buy both of us.
With a smile, for you haven't let me wear one in such a long, long while. You make my eyes run over all the time. Don't you ever get tired of hurting me? Don't you ever get tired of hurting me? Don't you ever get tired of hurting me?
We'll see you next week. Thank you.